This is a podcast about both having autism and living with someone who has autism. My mom is Sonya, and I'm Josh, and this is Josh Has Autism.
Okay. Everybody, welcome to Josh Has Autism.
Hello.
So, Josh, you're laughing at my saying the wrong words and getting all confused right before this. So anyway, everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. We are 2 days late coming out with this one, so it should have been Friday. This is Sunday. I do apologize for that. Things have been bonkers for a number of reasons. So, anyway, it doesn't, they would just sound like excuses if I listed them, but needless to say, it was hard to even accomplish some things, let alone all the things we needed to. So
sounds like every day in my life.
I know, right? Right? Well, welcome everybody. So today, Josh, I want to talk to you about cliches and figures of speech. And we've done a podcast on that before. Mm-hmm. And you've helped me to understand why those don't work for you. And that is because you take things literally.
Right.
And figures of speech or cliches are oftentimes literally impossible. They just can't happen.
Right.
But short of that, they just don't make any sense to you.
Yeah. And I've gotten better at understanding them. I've gotten better at understanding them, and a lot of times it's not. A lot of times I know that someone's not saying things a straightforward way, mm-hmm. But like even now, sometimes I'll recognize that someone is joking about something, but I don't understand how.
Right. How do you understand if they're joking about something, but you don't understand how?
Perfect example happened earlier today. Dad said something, I don't really remember what it was, and you laughed and he chuckled.
Oh.
And I didn't get it. I still don't get it.
I don't remember exactly what words you said, but it was something like, if you were a business owner, let's say you had a store, mm-hmm. And somebody walked in, you would say, welcome. You would say, come on in. You'd say, whatever it is that you're going to say, mm-hmm. that feels right to you when a customer comes into your store. Well, today, Dad walked in from the backyard and you said something that sounded like that. It was almost like you were like, welcome, come on in. And his answer, even though you didn't use those words, that's what it sounded like to both of us. And his answer, without missing a beat, was, thank you, I live here. So it was fun.
I asked, did he need anything? Do you need
anything?
Because he had come in from the hot weather outside.
Yeah, but the way it sounded was like you were saying, yeah, come on in, shop around, take your
okay.
So, yes. So
I get it now.
Right. So that was what was funny, and his answer was funny because it was kind of playing along with how it felt to him.
Okay.
But he knew that it wasn't a real answer.
Right.
So, anyway, so that's what made it funny, is that it resembled something that we've all experienced when we walk into, let's say, a convenience store. Mm. But, so he answered you. Thank you. I live here. So that's why it was funny to us.
Okay.
Yes. So, yes, does it make sense now?
It does, yes. Mm-hmm. It does make sense now. Thank you.
Yep. So,
but that's a perfect example, though, of where I know that there's a joke going on, mm-hmm. and it helps that you guys actually told me afterwards, yes, we are joking. Mm-hmm. But until now, I didn't understand the context.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And earlier I didn't understand that you really didn't
get
it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, so I'm glad that you know it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, it was funny.
Yeah, it was. Something happened similar to me yesterday. It was the funniest thing. We went to this incredible um, dog function that it was for the rescue that we got Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said to me, I said, do you have any kids? And I heard, no, I heard, I'm rich and I don't have any kids. And then they were gone. And I thought, that's hysterical. That's like, that's not really how people usually talk, right? Until you ask them about a question. I'm rich and I'm happy. Like, it's usually not the way that they answer.
Right.
Well, then I would have gone on thinking that was the conversation, only in text later on, I mentioned it, saying that it was hysterical, and she said, no, I'm married to Rich, and I don't have kids. So her husband's name is Rich.
Yes. Okay.
But she doesn't have any kids.
Okay.
So it was so funny, and then she was laughing, and we were all just laughing about it, because I thought, how funny is it that somebody's just so comfortable with their status that they just, I'm rich, don't have kids. So I thought it was hysterical, and it's even funnier that is not at all what she said.
Right.
And so now she thinks it's hysterical because she knows now that I thought that's what she said. Anyway, the whole thing was just very funny. Yeah. So if you think that you hear some things sometimes, it's interesting because you often are concerned that you will have a conversation and you have to work really hard to be present in the conversation and to focus on what's being said in order to get what is being said.
Let alone understand it.
Right. But I'm sharing that with you because I missed that entirely.
Yeah.
And this scenario now is entirely different, right?
Right. And it's good that everyone that was a part of that can look at it and laugh as well.
Yes. Yes. We all just thought that was so hysterical, because first I thought what she said was funny, because you know how we've talked before about a making a statement. Oh shoot, I can't even think of what it is now. Gosh darn it. It's stretching the truth, right? So it's not exaggeration. Well, but in this case, I thought she was being literal, and she was very comfortable with being literal about that because it made her happy. Right. So to me it was very funny, and the reason it was very funny is because most people are not that direct and comfortable with a statement like that.
Right.
And I thought she was, which made it more endearing to me, because you just, I was thinking, you go, girl.
She's just comfortable with herself, yeah.
Yes.
Whenever I first heard it from you, it was after the fact. You were just starting to explain the whole thing.
Yeah.
All I heard was that you heard what she said.
Yeah.
And my immediate thought was, well, yeah, kids cost a lot.
Exactly. So it wasn't. It made sense, right?
Yeah, but granted, I could see the humor in just that alone.
Yes.
So I thought that she might have been joking by saying that. Exactly.
And one of two things: either like, you go, girl, because that's your truth, go with it, or she was making a joke.
Yeah.
Like just as exactly what you just said, that kids cost so much money that no, she's rich because she doesn't have any.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I thought about too. So whenever it came back, and now I know that the husband is named Rich.
Yeah.
It's totally different. Right. And I thought about that, and thought about how you work so hard to gather information in a conversation. I think most people do, but for you, it did not come naturally, and does not probably a lot of times, although you're very good at it. I mentioned to RJ about how good you are at banter with people, and he said, yeah. I didn't even ask him if I could say this, but he said yes. He does it all the time, and because this is RJ talking, because I've got anxiety, I'm like, oh, you're talking to someone. But for you, you not only learned that that's part of conversation, communication, just experience of being alive, and also that's what Dad does all the time. That's what Dad does all the time. He talks to everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And with me, it's for bantering.
Mm-hmm.
I still get really nervous about it. It's whenever I can really banter with people that I really know that won't judge me or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like here at home.
Mm-hmm.
I can absolutely do that.
Mm-hmm.
I did it once at work.
Okay.
And it was just about closing time, it was we had no more patrons that we knew of in there. Like we had just done the checks, but we still have to do an announcement over the PA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing the PA thing, doing this last call to complete all.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys who works there, his name is Steve, and as a tag to the very end of it, I said, "This means you, Steve."
And did he laugh?
He did, yeah.
Oh,
he did.
good.
And one of the only reasons I did it was because I knew that the people who were working there would be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that there were no patrons in there that could possibly get offended.
Yes.
On someone else's behalf or misinterpret whatever.
Or if there was a patron named Steve.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it even though I knew who was there and all that, it was still very putting myself out there and very difficult to do that.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting to me is that you remember it, that you did this one time, and it had, it stayed with you clearly.
It was at most 2-3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's the only time I've done it.
Well,
but in that setting.
Yeah, sure. And I think that conversation for people, I think for most people, can be difficult, because you don't know exactly what the other people are meaning by what they're saying, and are you being witty, or do you just look
right. And that's one of the reasons that very deadpan jokes,
mm-hmm.
where you look stoic and your voice is like normal and there's no expression of humor,
mm-hmm.
which I had to learn, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That makes it very difficult for me to know that someone's joking.
Mm-hmm.
That someone might even be joking.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times I have to confirm that someone else was joking about that.
Right.
And
well, you've asked me. Just in everyday conversation, I'll say something, and there have been times where you say, "Are you joking?"
Yeah.
Because sometimes saying something deadpan is funny.
Or it could be taken where it's a serious thing,
mm-hmm.
but I don't know right. I can see possible humor in it, but I don't know if it's meant as it.
Right. And just like today, you think you could see us laughing about something,
And I knew...
So it must be funny,
yeah.
but you didn't know why.
Yeah, and because the response was different than what I could have expected.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that it was meant as a joke. I didn't understand how.
Right. And so that's just everyday kind of interactions. So when somebody is using a cliche in the conversation, does it make it harder for you to follow the conversation?
At times, especially if I've not heard a particular one before.
Mm-hmm. Because it just doesn't make sense, right?
Right, and I don't know what to make of it because I've never heard it before. I don't know what it's supposed to mean. I mean, sometimes it can be inferred,
mm-hmm.
but I still double check to make sure I understand it.
So, I came across a cliche the other day, and it was funny that there used to be this show, I don't know if it's still on, but Judge Judy was the name of the show.
Uh-huh.
And people would come in, and they're on TV, right? So they've signed releases, they're, you know, and I believe that if you go on that show, then you don't really have to pay. I'm not really sure. If let's say you lose the case.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think they get some kind of something for being on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a judge for a very, very long time. And she's known for not putting up with any deceitful behavior or nonsense.
Right,
you know, she just was what they call a straight shooter, which means it's, you know, there's no she's not going to be joking around about the stuff. She wants the truth, and she wants you to say it.
Yeah.
And not to lie
and not
to
dance
it.
around it either.
Exactly.
No,
So
which is another figure
cliche.
speech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she wrote a book. And the name of the book, now this, I don't know which word it is, but this, in essence, this is a cliche, and it says the name of the book, which is don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. And I had never heard that before. Okay. What it means is don't try to pull something over on me.
Right.
Don't try to do something right in front of me and then tell me that it's something else.
Right.
In other words, yeah, don't treat me like I'm stupid.
Right.
I see what you're doing.
Right.
And that's one that I had never heard before. And when I heard it the first time, I was like, what does that mean? And I had to look it up because I had never heard it before. And so I thought about you when I heard that. So somebody was talking to me. Mm-hmm. They, not to me, so they weren't saying that, making that statement to me.
Right.
It's not like I had done that.
But it had come up in a conversation with you.
Yes. And I thought about you because I thought, well, in that conversation, that person made that cliche and then kept on talking. And I didn't know what it was because, and for me, I could just go, all right, well, I'll figure out what that means later. And then because they just kept on talking, so then I just kept up with them, mm-hmm. right? And they had used other flowery language that helped me to know what they were talking about without having to know what that cliche meant at the time.
Right.
Now, typically, if somebody wasn't just talking and they were like in a zone and just I needed to listen right then, mm-hmm. I would have said, what does that mean?
Right.
But because they kept talking, I just needed to follow along.
Right.
If that happened to you, is it hard for you to just follow along? Or because you get that kind of trips you up, or you get stuck on it? I don't want to ask you too many things.
Right. So let me try to explain my thoughts on that particular one at least.
Yeah.
Is that I don't know if I've heard it before or not. I don't recall. I don't know.
Right. Well,
but I'm hearing the whole thing. you said it was, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's
Sorry about that.
it's all right. It's, I see it as an analogy.
Okay.
Which in this case, it is the equivalent of, like you said, doing something right and to someone, and then telling them that's not what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not true.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So, with me, that particular one is fairly straightforward. But that's also because I've had a lot of experience and knowledge to know or to learn how things are sometimes.
Well, we've spent a lot of time on language.
Yes.
You and I have.
Yes.
And it goes back to practicing out in the community, and to get you to where you could have interactions.
Right.
When you were on your own.
Right.
But I'm asking you not so much about this particular cliche.
Mm-hmm.
I was using that as an example for you.
Right.
How it is that there are cliches that never heard them before, so I don't really know what it means. But in this particular conversation, that person kept talking and was kind of explaining themselves in a
roundabout way.
Yeah, well, no furtherance of how what their experience was. So I understood what they were trying to convey without having to know what that specific cliche meant.
Right.
So my question to you is: would you be able to do that? Are you? Is it easier for you to just let something like that go and move on with the conversation, or does something like that trip you up because you really are now, not only do you not understand what that meant, but now it bothers you that you don't know what that meant and you don't know what to make of it?
Right. At this point, I'm going to start off in a little bit of a...
No, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, at work we have we've had a newer person in the same position that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
She joined, or she was started a week or two ago, and I've been helping to train her.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that a lot of the stuff that we're supposed to do, if you just tell someone what they're supposed to do, it's not going to stick, because there's a lot of exceptions.
Right.
And
yeah.
So,
mm-hmm.
Finding these exceptions and showing them how that works, as well as all the tips and little things that I've figured out to help. I've been able to help her figure out what she's supposed to do and how she's supposed to do it a lot easier. And one of the biggest things that I've tried to make a point with her about is that if she doesn't know something, ask. And that's the point I was trying to make for your original thing, was that I know that I can ask, and that's one of the big points one of the biggest points that I can make is that if I have a question, I need to ask, because otherwise people aren't going to know that I'm not following something, or that I don't understand something, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't speak up, they're not going to know what I'm having trouble with, or if I'm having trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think a big point for everyone to understand is that it's very much okay to not know what something means.
Yeah.
It's very much okay to not know how to do something.
Right.
And that's why it's important to get, to do your best to have people in your life that will explain, that will take the time for that.
Yeah.
What I think that you do when you are training there, I think it's just such an important part of what you do. Because you said, if you don't know, ask. There's a thing that you've told me before. That is, if I don't know until I know it.
Right. So I don't know what to ask.
Because you don't know it's a thing.
Right.
And so by you taking the people that you're training and saying, okay, this might happen. And when this happens, this is what you do. Because they wouldn't know to ask about that, because they wouldn't know that it's an exception.
Right.
But in your training, because you are meticulous about every aspect of it, that's very helpful to other people, because you're including that in your training.
Right.
And I would imagine that's why they like you training so much at work. That's why the bosses put you in charge of that, because they know that the people are going to be trained and have a full understanding of what their job involves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily at work, it's not always going to... It usually won't be a nebulous, what do I do?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because it's usually about a specific item or subject or whatever.
Right.
And so if I don't know the answer to, like, let's say this book has a strange sticker on it that I've not come across before, because the stickers are what we use to help place them in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
I ask the people at the front desk, and if they don't know, I ask them who might know.
So, yeah, I think it's fantastic, and you work at a wonderful location.
I do.
With wonderful people.
Yeah.
And they help you.
Yeah.
So that's really great. I want to go back to me asking you about cliches.
Okay.
So, I'm wondering, now you personally have had a lot of time spent explaining figures of speech and cliches and jokes and sarcasm.
Yes.
And how somebody says something, if it's a deadpan delivery, how you just mentioned that.
Yeah.
How it can be a serious subject or it can be funny.
Right.
And you knowing the difference is very difficult at times.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to find out from you is that when somebody uses cliches in conversation and you hear that, or even when you read it, maybe it's easier when you read, I would think it is.
Yeah, it can be.
Is it a distraction?
How so?
That you've had to spend so much time understanding that a cliche is using words as a descriptor that is really not having to do with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It was very complicated.
Yeah.
For a very long time, and
Yeah.
it just made no sense to you at all.
Yeah, I remember asking you, well, why don't they just say what they mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
And I believe one of the responses that I got for that, as I was learning that, was that sometimes people can't put into words the right way of what they're feeling, so that you can use an analogy or a figure of speech or a cliche to help explain what they're feeling or what they're thinking.
Right.
And it's not always perfect, but that helps to get their point across.
Right. And I knew somebody one time that used a phrase that I've never said in my life. So I'm saying it here for the very first time to repeat what they said.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they said this phrase all the time. Just about every conversation I had with them, they would say whatever it was, is going to hell in a handbasket. That was it. Whatever it is. Oh, it's going to hell in a handbasket. And in my mind, and I think this is very pertinent for me to bring up to you, because I'm a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
This person said virtually everything. By the time, it was used so much. It's like the stuff that wasn't in that handbasket is very few. Yeah. Very few items, very few experiences, very few anything, right. Because that figure of speech was used so much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when she would use that phrase, the first time was like, what? That's just strange. Well, then the fact that she kept using it made me picture all the time, of a literal basket,
right?
And all these little things piled up in the basket, and then how would it get there? How would it get there really? If you're going to take that, if it's going to go to hell in a handbasket, how does it get? An elevator, an escalator?
No, it's called a elevator.
Yeah, right. So all of these things. So then I would stop listening to her because I was picturing these scenarios that were very funny to me.
Yes.
But that's not what she meant this. This is just the way that she spoke.
Right.
It was an overusage of a figure of speech, but it just happened.
Right.
And to me, I never said anything to her because I why?
Right.
But because it wasn't a really good friend, it was more like an acquaintance.
Uh-huh.
And if it was a friend, I would have joked with them.
Right.
I would have said, well, what exactly is in that handbasket? Is this the only thing that's in it?
Right.
Well, how big is it? What's it made out of? What's a handbasket made of?
Liquor, usually,
yeah, right. See, I would have fun with somebody that I knew, but this was just an acquaintance, and I didn't feel like that was appropriate.
Right.
Because they were a very serious person. Anyway, my point is that when I heard that every time, I could not listen to what she was then saying because my mind then went on to what I just said. The nonsense.
And then you couldn't focus on what she was trying to say.
Exactly. So I give you that example because that's exactly what I'm asking you about. If you hear something, let's say I hear somebody speak in French.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know French, so it's all lost on me. There's very few words that I know. So it's all lost on me. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that person is even saying. The question to you was, when you hear cliches at this point, since you've gone over them so much in your life,
mm-hmm.
does it feel kind of like a foreign language at times, and you just kind of go, oh, okay, I'm out? Or do you focus on the figure of speech or cliche that they're saying, and does that ever happen to you that your mind kind of wanders like mine did?
Right.
Or do you just kind of go, oh, okay, I can't focus on that because I'll miss this?
Right.
And you kind of stay with them and what they're saying in order to hopefully understand.
Right.
So 3 things.
So, my thought process, if there is more than one figure of speech or cliche or whatever, I probably won't be following along after that point.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's one, it usually will cause a little mental stumble,
mm-hmm.
because I have to pause for a second and make the connection of what they're saying in the context of what's being said to figure out what they're saying,
mm-hmm.
or what they're meaning when they're talking.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times I'm still not really sure if I want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
so if it's something that I need to confirm or whatever, well, it is something I need to confirm because I want to make sure I understand. So I say, so just so that I'm understand. Let me try and. Are you saying?
Right. You're asking them to clarify.
Yeah, but I try and put it into words what I think they're saying.
Yeah. I was wondering for you if a verbal conversation like that feels like me having to write something down. So, one of the hardest things for me was that when there was a lecture being given, like in school, I would go in college, same thing, and even, some courses that I've taken since then. If I have to take notes, I look back at my notes, and they consist mainly of half sentences.
Yeah.
So they start out, and then this means, okay, nothing. Yeah. All right, there's nothing. It's not finished.
Right.
Like it can be an explanation or a definition, or it doesn't matter what it is because I've got half a sentence because I cannot write as fast as they speak.
Right.
And I begin to get very frustrated with that. And that's why I will record things so that I can get them all.
Right, and heaven forbid you also have to copy something from the board or whatever.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Right. And so my favorite is when somebody giving information in that kind of setting is they will say, "This is going to be in a handout. This is in the handout, or this is in the book." And so you don't need to write it down. It's there for you.
Yeah.
Then I can totally engage in the conversation that's going on. Because I do find it very difficult to write a lot of information while that information is being given.
Right.
If it's a short something, let's say I have to take down an address while someone's talking, I can do that. They can give that address to me and continue talking, and I can write down the address and take in what they're talking about after the fact. But that cannot be in more segments than one.
Right.
Does that make sense to you? So they can't give me one thing to write down and keep on talking, then another thing to write down and keep... I'm not going to get there.
Right. And that's one of the biggest issues I had in college, was that I could not... I had to either focus on writing the notes down from the board, on participating on what's being said, or... And the third part never really came up because I couldn't do it, was trying to write down what was being said. Yes.
And so it kind of, that's similar to what I'm asking you about, in that I can't do both of those. I mean, I can't, in that situation, in that scenario,
right.
I don't do very well.
Right.
And so my question to you is that in a verbal conversation, if somebody says something to you that kind of makes that mental stumble, as you described.
Mental stutter, whatever, yeah.
Do you focus on that cliche, or do you try to listen to what they're saying after that? Which is typical?
It varies.
Okay.
That's the best I can say, is that it varies. It depends on multiple different factors. Whether I'm mentally there up to that point, whether I've already been stressed out during the day or not, and if I'm awake, if I'm... When I say awake, I mean like aware while awake, is what I mean.
Right. So, I don't know if I've said this on here or not before, but when you were a little guy, I had a conversation with you one time, and it wasn't one of the times that we were actively working on helping you, but I said the cliche, "It's a piece of cake." Now, I might as well have started a whole new conversation, because what I was originally talking about was gone, because no matter what, you were then focused on the cake.
Right. Because I
So
didn't
it was
understand.
right. So I said it's a piece of cake. You said we have cake.
Yeah.
No, it's about it. That means it's easy. That means that we can get it done fairly easily. You said making a cake is easy, and I said, well, yes. If you buy the kind that's in a box and you just add a few ingredients, but if you do it by scratch, which means you have to
Mix everything.
mix everything, it's not as easy.
Right.
To which you responded, we have cake? So that was where you started. So I bring that up to let you understand and to realize, how far you've come in being able to
have my cake and eat it too.
Yes. Yes. Boom. Yes, absolutely. For you to be able to skim over somebody's cliches that you don't get,
right,
to in order to keep up with the conversation, is difficult. A huge feat.
It's difficult, but it's doable.
Yeah. At times, you're telling me.
At times, yes.
Because sometimes it's not possible.
Right.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have a better understanding of them now, though, than you did? It's like a cliche is just a way people speak, and it's kind of like almost like a reference, like as you say, like an analogy. Right. Now that you have had so much of this kind of conversation in therapy and at home and in the community, and then just your maturity at this point, and as you get older, your wealth of knowledge grows. It just has become easier.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's there was something that was right there, and now it's
sorry. What was it? What was it about?
Cliches, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone.
Is it gone? Oh man. I'm sorry. Sometimes I talk too much, and then you. Yeah, sorry.
It happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really cool. So.
What, me forgetting?
Yeah. So no. So you really have benefited from all of the time spent on getting you through this.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I remember what it was.
Okay.
You had asked it. I think it was a side question or whatever, of if reading figures of speech or cliches was easier or not. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how I remember that part, but
I know. I was just thinking that. How do you remember what was just said? Probably because it had to do with reading.
Possibly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
because I'm like, whoa.
I know. But when it comes to reading a joke or a figure of speech or what have you, a lot of times it's not obvious. Like, it's not as obvious as if someone was actually saying it. But in other ways, it's a lot easier to tell. Because of punctuations and emphasis on particular words being in written form, it's whenever they're italicized,
right,
or slanted or whatever. You put emphasis on that word in the sentence or phrase in the sentence.
Right.
And there are one of my favorite things I remember seeing in regards to this kind of thing was from a Star Wars book.
Oh.
It was from one of the X-Wing pilots trying to do the Jedi mind trick.
Okay.
He had just recently started training in the Force. It wasn't Luke. It was another character from the expanded universe or whatever. Okay. And he had heard from Luke about Obi-Wan doing, these are not the droids you're looking for. And so he tried to do something similar. We belong on this base. And the stormtrooper responds back, you belong on this base? Now, in my way of just saying that, you could tell it was a question with the lilt of the pitch or whatever at the end of it to make it a questioning sound. And,
right.
But in the book, you wouldn't have been able to hear that, obviously. But it was a question mark.
Oh.
Yes. What makes it amazing is that the very next line is that pilot's thoughts. Holy crap! It's working. And then he tries to use it some more to go further with that, and shootout breaks out or whatever. But anyway,
right.
Totally fails. But my point is that punctuation and where commas are, where italicized words are, all of that stuff help imply how things are supposed to sound, but they don't always have the meaning behind it that can be inferred from a tone of voice.
Right.
Like you can have someone yelling in a friendly manner. Like, hey, come over here. And it could be an excited voice. Hey, come over here.
Yeah.
Very different tones of voice, but it will be written exactly the same way.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why in text messages it's so difficult to get across.
And in email.
Yeah. But in text messages especially, because you don't always... In your head, you don't hear how they're trying to say it properly sometimes.
Exactly.
Like you can have something written the same exact way, but it could be taken in a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely. The things that you're describing...
It's the English language.
I want for anybody that's listening to understand that this stuff didn't come naturally to you.
Oh, no.
And I just want to encourage anybody that's listening that might be feeling like they're struggling with it, or they're a loved one or a caregiver of somebody that's struggling with this, that, it's the repetition. It's the using it and being in situations where it comes up. And you and I used to, on car trips, all the time, it would be who on the radio, who's singing this, what's the name of this song, because it would never occur to you to ask somebody's name, that went to your school, and this is how we kind of related that.
Right.
So, the singers have names. They have names. This is their name. You hear their voice, if you like that, this is the person singing it. And the song has a name, and this is the name of it. And the people that you go to school with have names.
Right. And
so that was used for that. But the figures of speech and cliches, we used to spend a lot of time on it. And it did not come easily for you. It wasn't, this is learned. And I'm not trying to make light of that, because you worked hard. To get this. This is hours upon hours upon hours.
Yeah.
And this is something that kind of stuck because you spent so much time on it and put in so much effort.
Yeah.
And
I would like to point out something that is on a parallel line of this, is that even up through middle school and high school, a lot of times I could not point out who was who, but not just because I couldn't remember their names and attach it to who they were, but because I could not. For some reason, I would more often than not remember what they wore, but not what they look like.
In a similar note, I remember what a person's dog looked like and what their dog's name is or their cat before I will remember their name or exactly what they look like. Right. Actually, that second part's not true because I typically remember faces, but I do not typically remember a person's name. I have to hear it a few times.
Right, and I still have difficulty remembering names and putting them with faces. And
interesting. So you remember what they were wearing?
At times, yeah. Yeah.
Is that...
but especially in elementary and middle school, that was the case.
Okay. And did you not look at their faces?
No, I would look at their faces. I would not remember it. Okay. I would not be able to... I'd occasionally remember some things.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me because I remember at times asking you, is that the boy that sits next to you? You wouldn't know. I don't know.
Right.
And that makes sense because you didn't recognize their faces.
Right. And a lot of times I would remember their backpacks better than I would remember their faces. And it's just one of those... I never really put that together, really. That... I never put that into words to explain that before, is what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
And so you bring that up now, it made me think of that.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. Yeah, very cool. Well, this is awesome. I learned a lot about you today.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yep, that's really cool. So let's just say we're done for the day with the podcast because it's Sunday.
Okay.
And I know that we've got some things going on. We've got to get back to it. And sorry everybody that we didn't put this out on Friday. It just got overwhelmed with stuff.
Yeah.
So this is going up today, and yeah. So thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. If you like what we're doing, please give us 5 stars. We are you can listen to us all over the place. I think it's on YouTube as well. But there's been some changes where it's I don't know. If you just go to the website sonyaking.com, it's SONYAKING .com, and if you there should be a list of where you can listen to us there, I believe. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you're having a nice weekend. Have a safe 4th of July.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of people out there, a lot of fireworks, a lot going on.
In the U.S. at least.
Yes, in the U.S. And if you have pets and dogs, please make sure that they're inside and they're secure when the fireworks go off, because a lot of times that scares them and they take off, and that's a lot of pups get lost because of that.
Yeah.
During this time of year, so make sure that they're as comfortable as possible, and make sure they're wearing their collars with their tags on it. Yeah. So anyway, everybody, sending everybody a big hug out there. I hope you're having a great day, a nice weekend, and we will hang out and talk to you next week. Love you.
Bye.